Hey everybody, welcome to Mighty Blaze. I'm Jenna Blum, one of the co-founders of The Blaze, and today I'm here with two authors for the price of one, Christina Baker Kline and Anne Burt, who have written a book together called Please Don't Lie. Welcome, Christina and Anne and Christina.
Thank you. So happy to be here. Hi, Jenna.
Hi you guys. Hi. We are very, very happy to have you here to talk about this book. A few quick words for those of you who are returning to the Blaze. Thank you for coming back to the party and bringing your light to our Blaze. And for those of you who are new here, welcome. We're a team of about 30 creative professional volunteers who got started bringing authors to new readers during COVID. Obviously, we're beyond that now, and we're still going strong, bringing you your favorite authors and their brand new books in your living room without anybody even having to put on pants. We still like this format. If you like what you see here, please give us a like or a follow on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, on Twitter, which I refuse to call X, on TikTok, on Substack. We are ubiquitous. And please follow our newsletter and subscribe at www.amightyblaze.com so you never have literary FOMO ever again. No more FOMO. Nobody likes that. And now, without further ado, as they say, we will return to our authors, Christina and Anne, and their new book, Please Don't Lie, which they co-authored, which I have so many questions about. I'm going to read your bio, you guys. Not your conjoined bio, but your independent bios. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, buckle up. So I'm gonna go alphabetically here. I'm using Baker Kline as your last name, Christina, instead of Kline. So
That is fine.
Going out on a limb. Christina Baker Kline is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 8 novels, including The Exiles, Orphan Train, and A Piece of the World. She's also the author and editor of 5 nonfiction books. She's published in more than 40 countries, world domination, obviously, and her books are taught in universities, colleges, and high schools. And by the way, if you go to Christina's website where I got this bio, she has very obligingly provided like a 53-word bio, a 120-word bio, a 240-word bio. I just read the 53-word one, but you can find out much more about Christina at ChristinaBakerKline.com. And Anne, it's such a joy to have you here. Anne Burt's debut novel, The Dig, was an American Booksellers Association Indie Next pick, the Strand Bookstore's mystery selection for spring 2023, and IndieBound Indie Next list lead thrills and chills. That is very hard to say. IndieBound Indie Next list lead thrills and chills. Reading group title for summer 2024. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, for those who have not had the pleasure yet of reading Please Don't Lie, every time I say the title, the book has to pop up, which just came out last week. Can you give us a synopsis of what the book is about?
Sure. Should I start? Yeah. Okay. So Please Don't Lie is a psychological thriller, and this is a new genre for both of us. So it's really fun to be working on this. It features a young woman. Her name is Haley Stone. And right at the beginning of Please Don't Lie, she's 30 years old, and she's recovering from a couple of years of terrible tragedies. These aren't spoilers. This is what she walks into the book having experienced. Both of her parents died in a house fire in Florida, the town where she grew up, and her younger sister had died recently of an overdose. At her sister's funeral, she met and fell in love with Brandon, and now at the beginning of the book, they're married. She's really looking forward to starting a wonderful new opportunity to get past her trauma with her new husband. He's moved to New York City where she lives, but he is a fish out of water. And so when his father unexpectedly leaves him at his death, the childhood home in a small Adirondack mountain town in New York State called Crystal River, where he grew up, Brandon says to Haley, "Will you go with me?" And she says yes, because she's ready for a fresh start with her new husband. So together they move to this tiny town. They're renovating his childhood home. He is a contractor. They meet a couple who seem to be really fun and great, and she feels like her new life is ready to start. But then things start to get a little weird. So Brandon is a little secretive, and there are locals who come out of the woodwork and say, "Oh, I know some things about your husband's past that she doesn't know what they're talking about." So as winter descends, Haley becomes more and more concerned. Is she actually experiencing some difficult, scary things, or is it something that she's feeling in her head? So that's how we start.
That is an amazing summary. Do you have anything to add to that, Christina?
I think Anne was very thorough.
Like passing the baton. Before I go into the many, many reasons why I loved and devoured this book, like I lay on my window seat, which you guys can almost see in the background here, and then just didn't get up again until I was done reading, because I put off all my other obligations because I didn't want to put the book down. It was really, really fun. I'm wondering, what is the inspiration for this novel? Like, who got it first? Who wore it better? Did you come up with it together?
That's such a great question. The way it started is that Anne and I so back in the day, a few years ago, Jenna, you probably remember, there was a moment with podcasts where people kind of had a lot of money to throw around and a lot of different ideas. And there was someone who had a podcast where a writer would write an outline of an idea, and then Hollywood people would take it and write a script, and then actors would act it out. So it was a fictional kind of teleplay idea. And they were paying a lot of money for these essentially outlines. And so I was approached to do this. I pulled in Anne. We worked on it together for about 3 days. They accepted it. We gave it to our agent, and he said, this is a really fun idea. Maybe you guys should consider doing the whole thing instead of giving it away. And we said, maybe we should just get paid for the idea. That was kind of a nice, quick way to, And he said, I actually think there's something here, and that you'll be surprised, and that you actually would have a good time doing it. Because he knew that the two of us had been talking about collaborating. We had collaborated on a bunch of things in the past. So anyway, we went away and we wrote essentially a screenplay length, 120-page outline, very thorough, very detail-oriented, with lots of dialogue and atmosphere and background. And then we wrote 3 chapters, and we sold the book and another book that's coming out next December. So a 2-book deal for 2 thrillers. And that was how it happened. And really, we came up with it that weekend, but it was something that had been percolating for both of us, this kind of idea of the Adirondacks and of a young woman who sort of is a fish out of water there. We just had been chatting about this as an idea, and then it coalesced into this book idea and then the book itself.
Nice. Where did you guys go to hatch this?
We spent a week in the Adirondacks. Anne, I'll let you tell that part.
Yeah, so we rented an Airbnb and we took ourselves there, and it was winter and it was really isolated, and it was this house that was a little scary down a far dirt road, and we worked together all day on the book. And then we made the maybe dubious decision that we were going to watch thrillers all night long. But we really scared ourselves, which might have been bad for our emotional health, but was really good for developing the book and the characters.
That's so funny. What thrillers did you watch?
A bunch of the movies we watched were rewatches for us from earlier, but that we hadn't seen and really analyzed together. So A Simple Plan.
I love that movie. Anne Burt.
Yeah. Good, right? We both of them. And Gone Girl we watched as well. Also, the book, brilliant, the movie, brilliant. But for Christina and me, for watching the movies, it would literally take all night long, because we would keep pausing it and saying, okay, did you hear that line? How did they do that? Does that relate to us? How can, what can we learn? What can we do? What can we see?
Jenna, the movie A Simple Plan, as you know, is so beautifully made. It's every single scene is important, and every single scene ratchets up the tension and creates a moment that surprises you. So that was a great one for us. And also Silence of the Lambs, of course, the movie Psycho with its surprises. Body Heat is another one we watched. So, we really immersed ourselves not only in the movies I've talked about, but in books, as you might imagine. So we were simultaneously reading lots of thrillers and just trying to understand what this genre really is all about and what psychological thrillers are in particular.
So our collaboration really started when our friendship started 25 years ago. We met at Watchung Booksellers in Montclair, New Jersey. fabulous independent bookstore that you know very well, Jenna, also, where Christina was giving a reading from the paperback that had come out of her second novel. And I was brand new to town, and I got the nerve up to introduce myself and say, I'm a new writer. Would you have coffee with me? And Christina was so generous and said, yes, weirdo, of course I will. But the next day, she called me up and said, hey, instead of coffee, what if we went to the movies? And did. And in fact, Christina's husband, Dave, did some research to help us figure out what that movie was. And it was Run, Lola, Run in the movie theaters. Do you remember that
movie? I do.
It was a thriller. And we started talking about that thriller on our very first friend date, right? And we never stopped talking about all kinds of literature and thrillers and movies of all genres.
Nice.
And Run Lola Run is kind of perfect because it's a young woman who finds herself in danger and through her own wits has to sort of figure out how to work her way through. And also there's this ticking time, it's just so cleverly made as a film, but it kind of, when we think back, it encapsulates a lot of the things that fascinate us as we're working on books together.
I love so many things about that story, about the story of how you met, like your kind of origin story, and also the story of you sequestering in the woods. So from the origin story, I'm going to pluck out for our audience for lessons, like always go to bookstores, independent bookstores. Special shout out to Watchung, which was my childhood bookstore. I grew up in Montclair, New Jersey. And also never be afraid to introduce yourself to writers. I mean, do it nicely, not with like a big axe or anything, but why not, right? And I also love that, Christina, you were like, yeah, let's do this thing. Let's go to the movies, which seems to be a sort of a persistent theme. But
yeah, it was, I think that was, there was something, first of all, it turned out Anne and I had not known each other at college, but we went to the same college and we're 3 years apart.
Oh, wait, what college did you go to?
We both went to Yale.
Cool.
And we overlapped by a year, but didn't know each other. But what that meant, among many other things, is that we shared a language. We had taken the same classes and read the same books, not all of them, but there were a number of core classes that we took that we had this, all of Shakespeare, and we read Chaucer, et cetera, et cetera. And so we had that. And then we had also both been in MFA programs, and people debate the merits of MFA programs, and we're happy to talk about that too. But I think for both of us, we had learned a certain kind of way of approaching stories and novels and reading other people's work. So that she went to NYU, I was at UVA, but we had this kind of shared language. And then shockingly, we had no idea when we met each other, but we were both pregnant, and we ended up having our children 3 weeks apart. Yeah. So we became new mothers at the same time that we also were becoming friends.
That's so many degrees of non-separation. I guess I would say it was obviously Beshert that you guys should form this very happy, like amicable and formidable writing team. At least I'm pretending and assuming it's happy, but I will ask more about that. I'm wondering, God, I have so many questions about this. So the MFA programs, you do hear people talk a lot of smack about them. I went to BU for my master's. I loved it because it gave me a year to do nothing but write and think about writing. And I'm not sure, like thinking about how I put books together, and especially a thriller, like whether my MFA would have informed my writing a thriller. Most of like what I learned about writing books, I learned from writing books, but the MFA taught me how to pay attention to language and really like avoid echoes. And I mean, there are things that got beaten into my head there that I have not relinquished, and for the better. So I will bite on that tidbit that you just threw out. Like, what do you think the MFA taught you and then did not teach you about writing a thriller in particular?
I mean, that's a really specific and really useful question to start on, because I would say it taught me nothing about writing a thriller. It taught me a lot about writing, about literature. Again, not how to write, but about writing, about the world of writing, honestly, I think that was, and that it was even a world, as opposed to a secret thing that I was doing in private. To me, the MFA program was like a bridge from wanting to be part of a world and not knowing how to be part of a world to some choices that I could make as a result. I wouldn't say it catapulted me into any great space, but it created an understanding that I could find my way. Now, that said, I was in the MFA program in the 1990s, things I don't know about today's MFA programs, some of them I think do deal with genre fiction, but mine did not even.
No. It's like genre was like, you're in the toilet.
Right. If you even said the word, somebody might have kicked you out of the program,
Exactly right. Yep.
So it's fascinating now. I'll say one more thing and then throw it to you, Christina. But new genre, I was always doing much more literary writing. I taught at something called Thriller Fest in New York City. Thriller Fest, right? So I had
a few months
ago, right? It was in June. I did a craft class, and my class was called The Art of the Slow Burn. And I was talking about, which please don't lie, is the concept of the slow burn thriller, using things from classic character building that you do talk about in literary fiction and that you hone in literary fiction, and how that does translate to driving character-driven psychological fiction. But I got a lot of comments from people who were in the class who were MFA students before and said, nobody has ever talked about plot before. Thank you for talking about plot and the importance of plot. They were like, I know.
Yeah. I mean, that's just a fascinating thing. When I was writer in residence at Fordham, we were developing the MA in creative writing. And one of the things that was really important to me was that we talk about the business of writing and about the plot as well, that we talk about practical things in addition to, the sort of celebrating the word and reading really esoteric, very narrow, but very beautiful prose by people. Because I think it can be both, and I think it should be both. I went to an MFA program that was very old school, and even talking about the business of writing was kind of a dirty word, and talking about genre was a dirty word. It was very literary. What I got out of it is what Anne was saying about community. I love being part of a community of writers. I still have lifelong friends. I have lifelong friends from that. I never found a mentor though, but I did have a fellowship. I had massive student loans from doing a master's degree in England, or not massive. They were massive to me at the time, like $20,000. That is no longer massive. But I needed, if I was going to try to actually write a book, which I wanted to do, I wanted to write a novel, I knew I needed 2 free years. And so I just applied with the goal of going somewhere that would give me the fellowship for 2 years. And so essentially I put my head down, I pretended to write short stories, and I wrote a novel. And by the way, I don't think this is true any longer, but when I was in an MFA program, even writing a novel was suspect in the program. You needed to be writing stories, and everyone valued stories more and wanted to talk about stories and did not even discuss writing a novel. So I just secretly wrote this novel, and the year my MFA ended, I took another year. I worked in a wine shop for 40 hours a week, and I worked for a caterer, and I finished the book. And then that was my first novel. But I don't even know how I would have gotten started without the MFA program because of the funding. And also it really made me think of myself as a writer. But if I were running an MFA program, I would run it quite differently.
I would too. I think we all went to the same MFA program, different chapters of it in different regions, because we were not allowed to write genre. We were not allowed to use more than 3 adjectives or adverbs a page. We were not allowed to write a novel. We were not allowed to ask, can you introduce me to your agent? None of that. Like the filthy, dirty business of actually making a living and a life as a writer was something that was so outside the ivory tower walls. And in a way it was good because it gave us the chance to concentrate on craft. And I did learn so much. And then I likewise would have a component to my program that teaches people actually how to get an agent, how to structure your book so that it might sell. What genre even is your book? And also, let's write a book, right? So, I mean, We should also have
yeah.
an MFA program.
And then I would also add, this has always been my secret, like if I was running an MFA program, I would add something about great professions for writers outside of academia and outside
Ooh.
of the field of literature, outside of publishing. You know, I ended up going into nonprofit communications. And I did nonprofit communications for education organizations and arts organizations for 30 years. That is the kind of thing that nobody says to you when you graduate. Here's some ideas outside of the Chronicle of Higher Ed for adjunct teaching positions that are going to pay you $2,500 a semester, which you can't live on. You know, that wasn't part of it. I mean, I know so many, I did adjunct teaching too. There are people who were, you know, I remember, right, like traveling from gig to university to university to cobble together enough $2,500 a semester gigs to eke out a living, and then trying to be a writer on top of that, impossible.
So true. I do think we should start a collaborative MFA program. We have our thoughtful bro with us today. Hey bro, how you doing? I would do that in a second because my career was teaching and is teaching outside of this and speaking and adjuncting and so on. But I just wrote and we'll have a book come out in January, and it's about writers, which I thought was kind of a cheat, but it was fun. And my favorite chapters, like 3 of my favorite chapters, are set during an MFA program. And I was kind of snort laughing my whole way through. I was like, I have been waiting for a place to put this for years and years. Like, let's dish. Okay, but I could talk about this all day. We could have like a, MFA support network kind of encounter group. But we have to talk about your amazing book. So one of the things that I love about Please Don't Lie is Haley, the main character, the protag, leaving the big city for what her visiting friend Emily calls a trad wife existence with her husband Brandon. And when I read that, I was like, oh, I think I actually want to be a trad wife, except for the trad wife part, because like what Haley does is not, the giving away your power to somebody who rules the household, kind of a problem. But I loved her life in this rural area where she was suddenly canning things and like wearing cute leggings and like building fires and so on. So I was wondering, like, that to me is as part of the coziness of reading this book. And I do not mean to say it is a cozy mystery, because it is not. It is clearly a psychological thriller in atmosphere, in feeling, in construction. But it had this deliciously like wrap a blanket around yourself feeling. And maybe it's just my fantasy of wanting to run away from the city and go live in the country. But it was like Virgin River, and then things go like dreadfully bad. Like, do you guys have that? Do you secretly want to be like trad wives without the trad wife part and live off the grid and just write books?
Jenna, it's so funny that you zero in on that, because Anne and I had so much fun with the character of Emily, who's the sort of wisecracking New Yorker who comes in and is like, what in the world are you doing? That we decided that our next novel, and the novel that we're working on right now, is a trad wife thriller. So it's actually about, and some of your
set in Crystal River, set in the same town.
Set in the same town. It's another Crystal River mystery. You don't have to have read the first to read the second, but if you do read the first, there are all kinds of things you'll be aware of as you read the second book. We're obsessed, Anne and I, with pop culture, first of all, but also with how women wrestle with femininity, feminism, obviously the choices you make about working, about motherhood, about marriage, about sexuality, all of it. And the trad wife phenomenon, which is the phenomenon, just for anybody who doesn't know, it is essentially women who are cosplaying femininity. They often are influencers, they have followers, they wear prairie dresses, they have chickens, and they milk their cows and have 8 children, and a kind of magical seeming existence where they celebrate domesticity and not working. And the irony, of course, is that lots of them are earning quite a bit of money doing this job. So they're actually working. But it's fascinating to us. So our next novel begins with a trad wife influencer disappearing. But in Please Don't Lie, that sort of foray of Haley leaving New York City and moving out to the country was really fun for us to explore. And sort of, how does your identity get subsumed by someone who has a big personality, who you're living with, in this case, her husband? How do you change your priorities? Who are you when you no longer have all the markers around you?
Right. And of course, Haley is a seeker. That's part of who she is. And having had all these tragedies in her life that she's trying to understand herself in the wake of, she's trying on a new identity too. So she enters this space thinking, maybe this will work for me because what I've been doing isn't. And I think that's really relatable, whether you actually have a trad wife fantasy or not. I don't, to answer your question. But I am fascinated with it and by it. I think I'm the Emily in the trad wife fantasy of just sort of like, qu'est-ce que c'est trad wife? But I want to get inside it. I want to understand it just the same way that Christina said, that I love the opportunity to dig into tropes and concepts that are reflections of what women are thinking about vis-a-vis the culture at large. You know, another piece of it that we deal with in Please Don't Lie is the self-help industry.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really big part of this book. And the way that self-help, and, you know, we love self-help as an industry. It's fantastic and interesting. And sometimes it can tip a little bit too far into prescriptive things about, you know, people that are not helpful. And both things are true in this book. There are moments in which the self-help actually gives Haley something important. And sometimes it leads her down a path that is not so good.
And I totally agree. And the trad wife thing, what I think people are fascinated with, and I think is that it is a fantasy of simplicity.
Yep.
And, you know, self-help books do that too. They give us a fantasy that think that our problems are solvable, and that if we have the right mantra, or we look at things from the right perspective, eat, pray, love, if we just sort of follow the rules, our lives are gonna be better. We're gonna become enlightened. I think the trad wife thing is women have so much on them about expectations, about who they should be and how they should live. And there is just some joy, I think, that you take just looking at these women and thinking, maybe there's a way to have a great life that's actually just within four walls, and it's very small, it's very contained. You take care of your family, and that's that. When we all know the reality is a lot more complicated than that.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, I think that our lives too, as working women, are very complicated. And so my trad wife fantasy is about moving to a more physical existence in a rural area. I had a family home in Minnesota for many years and sold it in 2023. But I would go out every summer and like can my garden, and I would not wear prairie dresses, but I would wear makeup in my garden, and everybody there called me Beyonce because I was wearing makeup in my garden. I'm like, I'm not actually Beyonce, I'm a blonde girl. But I loved it, and I would come home to Boston, downtown Boston, with all this produce, and my neighbor upstairs would say, you're so weird because you go away all summer and you're Amish, and then you come home and you're like this urban, you know, writer creature. But there is that. I think the scary thing about the trad wife thing is that, which, at least my impression is that you're supposed to call your husband the head of the household, and you give away a lot of your power. So that's what I mean about, I want to be a trad wife, but I don't want to be a trad wife. Like, I love the simplicity of it, and seeming simplicity, and yet have no wish to give away my power, and nothing is uncomplicated. So we cannot wait to read that next book. And I do think that the seeds of it are here in Please Don't Lie, because Haley's life seems at first much less complicated when she moves to Crystal River. And I love that you guys are doing a series, by the way. And then, you know, is not. She spends a lot of time like arranging cattails on the dining table.
We had a really great time writing all of the atmospheric stuff, including those domestic details. I mean, it's such a joy to write.
Fun. So fun, right? So good. Can you talk a little bit about the female friendship in the book too? Are there two pivotal female friendships? And that's part of the wrap a blanket around yourself element for me, is that Haley, when she moves to this town, makes a new friend. And I was really moved by your story about meeting at the Watch On Bookstore because Anne very bravely said to Christina, like, hey, can we have coffee sometime? I'm a writer. Also, like, it's hard to make friends as an adult, and yet Haley does it, and it's a very instrumental friendship for her. So can you talk a little bit about the concept of female friendships in the book?
Sure. I mean, I think I'll start and then I'll test it.
Great.
The friendship between Haley and Megan, who's the woman that she meets in Crystal River, was at the heart of this book for me and Christina from the very beginning. We always knew, I mean, it's about a lot of things. The marriage is very important and all of that kind of thing. But we knew there was going to be a strong female friendship that was going to propel this book forward and was going to be central to, no spoilers, but central to the action all the way through. And that was so important to us for a few reasons. One, the real life reasons, but two, this is a genre in which if you tip outside of these books that we admire, the ones by Megan Abbott, by Gillian Flynn, this sort of strong women who are complicated and maybe not, quote unquote, completely likable. These are the characters that we're drawn to in this genre. And, there's like an old trope of like all the dead girls in the serial killer murders, and that all of the women in an old school version of thrillers were just in danger and had no agency or any of that. The friendships between women in this are part of what give them agency. They create opportunities for each other.
Or at least the illusion, right? Because Haley, our central character, comes into the story with a lot of baggage and a lot of trauma, and so she can't quite trust her own ability to trust other people. Yeah. Our epigraph is from Dostoevsky, and it is, above all, don't lie to yourself. So Haley, our central character, and the other characters in the book are lying to themselves and to each other in different kinds of ways. And that was one of the things Anne and I really wanted to explore, was how even in intimate relationships, we don't always tell everybody everything, right? We keep things from each other. And sometimes those things are small, but sometimes they're actually really huge. And we wrote the book in the third person. We've experimented with writing it from Haley's first person point of view, but we wanted that slight distance from her. We wanted to sort of let the viewer, in some ways, having written the outline as a sort of screenplay, it's a very cinematic. Don't you find it's quite a visual book? Like you really see it.
Absolutely.
So I'm always thinking of like the reader, seeing it. But that we wanted the reader to be able to think about Haley like a half step from her consciousness. So it's not an unreliable narrator story. It's really a story about like what is going on in everybody's heads, even though we're in Haley's perspective.
Yeah, and the two friendships that you allude to, the other one is with Emily, who we talked about, who's her dear friend from New York and from her life. Emily is super skeptical about Haley making these choices, and she sees Haley as the Haley she's known in New York her entire friendship. And since they were young, they started college together. Megan sees Haley as the person who she met in Crystal River on this plane at this moment of her life. And you've got two mirrors then for Haley in these two friendships. And Haley needs to try to understand which mirror is mirroring the me I want to be. So a lot of times, of course, in our intimate friendships, we're looking for identity markers in them. Is this friend a reflection of who I am? Is this friend an aspirational friend, somebody I wish I was more like? And sometimes, is this friend something that I've outgrown and is potentially not so healthy for me to continue anymore? And Haley thinks about all of these things while at the same time dealing with her own feelings of regret and self-recrimination for having left her younger sister behind in Florida to meet her own kind of tragic ends that she put upon herself. She feels like maybe she should have been a better sister, and that's gnawing at her and clawing at her all through the book as well.
It is a hall of mirrors. I feel as though it's not that Haley is being dishonest with herself, it's that she doesn't know which version of herself to trust. And that's what makes it a psychological thriller. It's not like a police procedural or a mystery or a whodunit. And these are my favorite kind of books to read and also my favorite kind of shows to watch. Like when I wrote my own thriller, and went from historical fiction to writing a thriller, I was like, I'm not qualified to do this. And I thought, oh, actually, yes, you are, because you grew up watching Lifetime Movie Network like 24/7 with your mom and at the gym, and also reading The Shining and The Secret History and, you know, The Plot and The Wife. And, you know, we could go on and on. Gone Girl, yeah, it's like a paragon of this particular book species. So really good stuff. I wonder if, without spoilers, you want to talk about Haley's backstory and how it informs her front story. And P.S., her younger sister is named Jenna, the one who meets the tragic end. Don't think I didn't see what you were doing there.
It was Oh, you discovered our big plot, Jenna. We met at Watch on Booksellers, and the sister's named Jenna.
And like, what are you guys trying to say? Exactly.
We love the name Jenna, and it just so happens. But it is a great name, actually. It's such a pretty name.
I just had to give you guys some crap about that. You know.
No, we love that.
That's Jenna.
You know, actually, you are not, but this Jenna is a tragic character. Haley's parents died in a terrible fire, and her sister felt responsible and died. Not exactly suicide, probably, maybe, but, you know, not in the best circumstances. And Haley had gone to New York and was getting away from all of it when this happened. And so she carries a lot of baggage. And we thought it was really interesting to look at the role trauma plays in the way people make decisions in the present day when something bad has happened in the past. You know, you don't always quite know. She was thrust on her own. You don't always know who to trust or how to trust. You don't know if someone is being nice to you for the right reasons. You kind of lose your compass. And that was what we wanted to show, was someone who had sort of lost her compass, but was ultimately a sympathetic character. Haley ended up being stronger as a character than we had initially given her credit for, I think. And so as the novel progressed, Anne and I, as I told you, we wrote this outline and we had a really strong sense of our ending, but we changed the ending. By the time we got to the last quarter of the book, we realized that our characters had shifted and changed, and that we ourselves had become bolder about what we knew we could do as thriller writers. So there are a lot of twists and turns in the last quarter of the book that Anne and I had so much fun doing. You know, that old sort of precept of writing that the best books, the ending is surprising but inevitable, but feels inevitable when you get there. We always worked toward that kind of feeling. We wanted to have surprises, but we also wanted it to be rooted in story and rooted in the reality that we'd built. And by the time, as I said, we got to that point, we realized that Haley was quite sophisticated in very interesting ways and wanted to sort of assert herself in ways that we hadn't necessarily expected at the beginning.
The book reads so seamlessly too. Like I expect it, and it's such a low bar for anybody to hit, to have a surprising yet inevitable ending, right? But I mean, you definitely met and surpassed my expectations with your surprising yet inevitable ending. And I'm getting a sense from how you're talking about this, how you developed the story and maybe got to that ending, which to me, I mean, plot is always the hardest part. That's probably why they don't teach it at MFA programs. You have to claw your way along, and it's usually architectural and mathematical, and it's like not the sexy part of writing where you're sitting and typing, you know, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It's really about that underlying architecture. So I feel like I have a sense of how you might have put that together. But in the final read, the book is so seamless. And when I was trying to think, like, who is Anne here and who is Christina? Like, where is each author in this book? I really could not, unlike in, for instance, Good Will Hunting, which to me is like a screenplay that's so uneven, where you're like, one person clearly wrote this scene and another person clearly wrote that scene, the wife farting in bed and waking herself up, and versus like your wife is an angel who's gone to heaven. I'm like, what? You know, there's like none of that in this book. It is just a smooth as butter ride. So how did you make that happen? How?
Thank you, Jenna. That was our goal. Like, we knew from the beginning that we didn't want to write one of those books where we traded off chapters or traded off main characters. They can be good, but that was not what we were looking for. We actually traded off after the part that we described of creating the initial book. Christina was actually on deadline for her next book, which will be coming out next year. So she needed to also write that. I have another career too. We are very different voices in our other books. So what we decided to do for this is then I took on from those 3 chapters and that outline, pulling the first draft all the way through. I pitched Christina when she had her time, then she took the second draft all the way through. And from then on, it was the 2 of us sitting across from each other at one of our tables. We live 6 blocks away from each other in New York City. So we would be at one or the other of our tables in our apartments with our laptops and our Google Docs. And we went sentence by sentence in draft 3 and beyond, both of us together, until we were both happy with every sentence. We read it out loud to each other, which I think is the key, over that table 3 full times, and tweaked it all the way for that process. And we ended up with what we now refer to as our third voice. It's not Christina's, it's not mine. It's ours, and we can identify it. And we've been writing essays in support of this book and doing Q&As. And we both have this great understanding now of like where that voice goes. It feels like a natural piece, and our collaboration now leans on that in a way that is exciting and has developed over the course of this work together.
And you guys are still friends after reading the book aloud to each other thrice. And I use the word thrice advisedly because of
Actually, we couldn't stop laughing. I know it's a thriller, and I know like really bad things happen, but we would crack each other up all the time.
Well, I mean, there are parts of the book that is sort of funny because we're writing in the third person, and we have this slightly, I wouldn't say it's quite arch, but there is a way that there's a commentary about the action all the time. And for example, you mentioned Emily. When Emily comes to visit, that interaction is kind of funny because Emily is the reader has seen Haley in her little habitat, and then Emily comes in and is judging everything. And I think there's a way, like when we were reading it out loud to each other, it was like, Emily, what are you saying? You're so mean. But this poor Haley is just trying to live her life in this place. And Emily's like, what the hell are you doing here?
Yeah, she's a little judgy. They're painful, those scenes where Emily shows up and Haley is trying so hard. Like she's even like wanded her hair or whatever, which she doesn't usually do. And Emily's like, fat wife life. And you're like,
Exactly.
have I outgrown this person? So obviously you guys know how to handle conflict, but how do you handle conflict when you're co-writing together?
That is such a fun question. Here's the secret, and I think to me, Anne can say what she believes. I think the secret to collaboration for anybody who's interested in it is you have to choose someone that you respect as much as you respect yourself, and whose brain you respect as much as your own, and who you really know you can learn from. Like, so if I ever, and Anne and I had moments where it was like, oh, should we take it in this direction? Should we go in that direction? I have this idea. I'll let Anne tell this little improv thing that we do. But from my perspective, I always, my thought was, if we disagreed, how maybe she's right. Like, maybe actually she's right. I mean, it was like my first impulse would be like, I'm going to defer to her. And then Anne would be like, no, wait a minute. That actually was interesting. Like, so it was always that kind of dialogue. And then the other thing is that I think we were always, and still are, trying to impress each other. Like, neither of us were slacking off. I never had the feeling that I was working harder than she was. I don't think she felt she was working harder than I was. Like, at every turn, we were kind of trying to prove to each other that we were equally embedded in this together. And so I think for both of us, when we're working on our book together, that is what we're working on. We're not multitasking with our other projects. We kind of do them like serially monogamously. But Anne, do you want to talk about our method of?
I do. And also to sort of to layer a little bit more onto that, we can, I think in a lot of ways, the key is that we each somehow have a way of keeping our friendship, and are writing our writing. And not everybody can do that. I respect the way Christina does that and the way we do it together. And there's a generative, like exciting imaginary world the two of us live in that is about our books and our projects. And then there's like our life. And maybe it's a strange thing for some people, but I think for a lot of writers and artists, it's not a strange thing. Like you can have parallel play.
I think it's so true. Can I just say one thing? I know you're going to tell the other thing, but we haven't really talked about this actually. This is a new thing, Jenna, that we're talking about. But our work life and our friendship are different. And also, Anne and I both, she lives in Western Connecticut, and I live in Maine part of the time, and we have lots of other parts of our lives. So it's not like we're together all the time.
Right.
As friends, we are lucky and happy to see each other when we can. But as writers, it's like a whole different thing. And that's so true. I love that point.
Yeah. I mean, Christina's my work wife, and my colleague. And that makes sense to me. Also, having worked in complex organizations most of my career, I didn't publish my first novel ultimately until I was 55, even though I had, an MFA when I was young. I thought I was going on that track. Life, hello, it happens, right? Twists and turns, had to make a living in a different way. Kids, family, in my case, divorcing, lots of stuff happened. So I think we also have had these different paths to get together. We have never been in lockstep in our careers as much as we've collaborated the whole time. We've brought different worldviews into what we're doing as well. In the moments of conflict, as you said, we developed out of that necessity of how do we deal with conflict without actually, getting into any kind of snarly things, because we just didn't want, life is hard enough. I'm going to add that too. We both have that same thing. Why create conflict when we don't have to? There's so much conflict. We can figure this out. We're in control of this world. So why are we going to add, I was going to say a bad word. Sorry.
No, go ahead. We are swear friendly here on Blaze.
Why add shit to a shit show? That's what I was going to say. So we try not to. But one of the big ways that we don't is because we figured out if one of us was going down a road with our ideas, the other one couldn't understand. And it was usually around 4:00 in the afternoon after a long day. We'd be like, oh, my brain hurts. My brain is too full. I can't. And we would kind of go and in our ideas of what was going on. We relied ultimately and figured this out to pull back and go back to something that I was a theater kid, first of all, and I did improv theater, as Christina mentioned before. There's one rule in improv, one rule only. It's the yes and rule. So if you're in a scene and you're doing improv, the idea of improv is you're totally making it up. There are two scene partners. The first scene partner has to say, I'm going to set the scene, and they make something up out of nowhere that the other person doesn't know. So let's say the person says, all right, so we are currently on Mars and it's raining actual cats and dogs. They're woofing and they're meowing, and we are naked from the waist up and scared. You can't say to them, no, we're not. And scene. It's bad. It's boring. The only rule is you have to say yes and. So you're like, yes, and a magical set of sweaters floats down from the sky and wraps us up. And now we feel prepared to jetpack over to another planet. So Christina and I use the concept of yes and with each other when ideas come up that we don't quite see, but we don't want the other person to feel like we're shutting them down. And a lot of times when you don't shut the other person down and you go yes and instead, it just opens stuff up for both of us. We both see things in new ways.
That is beautiful and so smart. Thank you. And I think it's really lovely to think about having a writing partnership as an oasis to go to when the rest of your life is your life. And both of you have individual writing careers as well. And that's a hard thing. I've been doing that my whole life, and I have a big group of friends to play with here in Boston, and we spend a lot of time texting about imaginary people or talking about imaginary people. But to not have that as a writer, I think would be dreadfully hard. So I'm glad that you have this fusion of a relationship that will produce more books for us. I have another question about genre, but I want to open up the floor to our readers and viewers because I know they have a couple of questions. So maybe we can do like a very quick lightning round, and then I'll have to let you guys go too because it's been almost an hour, believe it or not. Karen, would you mind throwing up a couple of questions? Ellen, who is our debut host and reviewer, wants to know, can a book be too cinematic? And please don't lie. Very cinematic. So I would say no, but you guys answer.
So I would say Anne and I read screenplays as well as novels. And in prep for this, for example, reading A Simple Plan as a screenplay too, and looking at how it's put together. I mean, screenplays then rely on actors to bring the words to life. So in that sense, yes, a novel needs to do a lot more heavy lifting than a screenplay does to make the characters live and breathe. Some novels can feel too slight and underdeveloped because in a screenplay, you don't need to fill in a lot of those gaps. The things that we took from screenplays were the propellant nature of them. I mean, in a really good screenplay, everything is built on everything else. You and I would imagine a bunch of your viewers have heard of Save the Cat, which is a screenwriting guide. It was sort of helpful. Both of us had looked at it before, but to review it and think about the marks you want to hit as you're writing a book that's very propulsive. And where it's important that chapters end in a certain way and that they're fairly short and that you're getting your characters in and out of situations fairly fluidly and quickly. So I think there's a lot to learn from screenwriting. Anne and I this is another whole thing that we won't talk about now because we're running out of time, but we were actually in a writer's room for 3 months together, working with executive producers and showrunners and the whole thing. And that taught us essentially how to write together. So bringing the skills of screenwriting and of story building in that way to this novel was part of the joy and the challenge of writing a book together.
And do you have anything that you want to say about the cinema?
What Christina said, and also that it depends on the definition of cinematic. You can look at that. If the question, can a novel be too cinematic? There are many ways that word cinematic applies. Can it be too sweeping? Is it that kind of cinematic, or can it be too much like a movie? I think that you just need to know which version of cinematic you're shooting for and get the right one.
Really good. Yeah, I was thinking when you were describing way back when you were talking about shutting yourselves in the cabin and writing and then also watching thrillers, that you did a sort of a reverse screenwriting process in a way, and especially because a lot of the thrillers that you were watching also are books, like A Simple Plan or Gone Girl, for instance. So there's so much to be learned from reading the book and then reading the screenplay and then watching the movie. Each one is a different art form, and you kind of did it sounds like backwards in some sense, but then also forwards if you're in a writer's room. So this whole talk is like a freaking master class in all kinds of writing, and you guys are so lucky to be here today. Not you two, but everybody watching.
You're lucky to be here too.
Right. I am lucky to be here. I think, Karen, we have time for one more question. What writing advice would you give to your younger self? Excellent.
Oof. Yeah.
I will say quickly, and then I'll let Anne. I would say what we've been talking about today, which is allowing yourself to experiment in all kinds of ways, not to feel constrained by the rules of like, I am this kind of writer or I write these kinds of books. I think it's very dangerous to silo yourself because you can get stuck, and allow yourself to be fluid, allow yourself to do a lot of different things. We are large, we contain multitudes. And the other novels I write really are very different from this, but this is informing my other work as well and has expanded me in all these ways. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, that's really great.
My advice would be a different version of that, which is maybe the externalized version, which is don't be constrained by the fact that other people might have a different kind of success than you, and don't make that your definition of success. I had a teacher once in a yoga class many years ago who said, don't compare your insides to somebody else's outsides, right? That is important in writing. When I was younger, I thought maybe there were two ways you could be a success, and both of them were probably taken by other people. There are so many ways if you open yourself to the definition of what success is and believe in your gut that your success is nobody else's path. It is your path, but don't give up on your path. Make sure it's yours.
Love that. That's actual self-help, like not like Instagram meme self-help. So I was just about to let you guys off the hook, but our thoughtful bro asked a question that I think is such a great dismount question, because we all need a little bit of bright spots. So I hear publishing has slowed down a bit, and there's a bit of gloom and doom around the industry lately. What bright spots do you both see in the book business these days? Great question.
That is a great question.
Yeah.
Look, this is a sort of bigger point, but it's related to that. And maybe Anne will be more granular, because I can't quite, there's so much to say. We could do an entire show about that question. It's very intense. One of the things Anne and I have learned by working together, we were just sort of tabulating all the ways that we've collaborated. We did a nonfiction book together. We were asked, we worked together on an imprint. We're asked to start an imprint for a literary publishing house. We worked on that for a year before we decided it was just too big an undertaking. Ultimately, we worked on a screenplay, as I said. We worked on a podcast. We've done a lot of kinds of collaboration. And one of the things I would say in answer to that question about the publishing world is be supple and be open. It's kind of what I said before, but a different version of it, which is there are many ways to write books. There are many ways to kind of have a foothold in the literary world, and just allow yourself, like, maybe work in a bookstore. If things aren't working for you right now, go to work for a bookstore or work with someone who's setting up a reading series. I mean, what you're doing, Jenna, right now, which is, your writing life and your generative talking to author life are connected to each other. And I really do think the people who succeed in this business are those who find ways to be in the business in different kinds of ways that give them access to different people, that give them lots of different experiences, that might open up doors that were otherwise closed. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Unity.
Yep.
Is bright spot always.
Community. That's right. I think that to me, the bright spots is that there are, new generations of people discovering bookstores. Young people love independent bookstores, and so there are maybe smaller ones, but they're popping up again. They matter as gathering places for a new generation. And there are different forms of books that aren't scary. Like we all love, I love hardcovers more than anything, of course, but I've really learned, like, audiobooks are great, ebooks are great, they're all great, and there are so many different forms now, and they exist, so you can read more. There's a lot of competition for reading. There's a lot of downsides, but that is an upside. There are more ways to engage with literature.
Love that. Thank you for answering that question. So be supple, find your community, find your people. If you're lucky, you'll find a friendship like Anne and Christina have. You guys seem so blessed with this long, productive, fruitful, fun, enjoyable, smart friendship, and it has given us the blessing of this book and your other books. Thank you guys so much. Yay, yes. Thank you guys all so much for being here.
Let me show you one really cool thing, like back to the hardcover.
Yeah, of course.
Look, this is a beautiful book. If you take off the dust jacket, look at this.
Wow, I literally have goosebumps. See?
Look how gorgeous this is.
Yeah, that is.
Wow. We like it too.
It's gorgeous.
Jenna, you've been amazing. Thank you.
Not at all. You guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Good luck on your tour, women, and our friends, our audience. Thank you as always for joining us on The Blaze, and we will see you next time. Bye. Happy reading.
Thank you.